Good morning. I wonder if you could hear me. Let's see. Do people have mics? Let's see. Can folks hear me? I wonder. All right. We got a little mystery going here.
I can listen to it. Give me. I just got a call. I got to take care of some business, but I'm going to keep listening.
Okay, that's fine.
I may host till later. Here, let me. Yeah.
Well, this won't go that long. Let's see.
Well, I'm not going to be very long. It's been an interesting morning.
Well, it'll be that way.
But I'll be back. I'm going to hear it a little bit. I'm going to just keep listening though. Thank you.
Okay, good. Lexo, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, good,
I got
good.
phone, so I had to allow access to the mic. It wasn't working at first.
Okay, cool. All right, so we only have half an hour this morning, so let's see. I wonder if there's any questions offhand. Anything?
Yeah, I have one for something that you brought up in the space yesterday.
Excellent. Good. That's excellent. Yes.
I got a chance to listen to it. First of all, I don't know if you know, only 45 minutes of it is up on that YouTube thing that you posted.
Yes. They get.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was intentional.
Well, yeah, I don't know what got edited or not. I just asked someone to help me with that, and so. But
okay.
It should be shorter.
So there was brief mention of the suffering that everybody's going through, and you said, and I've heard you say this before, there's an ocean of suffering out there, and the vast majority of it is unnecessary.
Yes.
In the context of mental illness, depression, anxiety, whatever manifestation it makes, whenever I get into this conversation with people, a large swath of people will say that these things are largely due to biological factors that are out of our control, and people are just that way, or they just have low threshold dopamine, or whatever it is. I'm not well acquainted with the medical literature on this. I'm just interested in hearing your understanding of how much of this suffering, at least in the mental illness space, is due to biology outside of our control, as opposed to things we really can work toward.
Okay, good question. So the question really is nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
When it comes to psychiatric illness. Well, with some psychiatric illness, there's no question. If, for example, schizophrenia, Huntington's chorea, some bipolar type 1, where you have real mania and real depression, and real vegetative depressions, I don't think there's any doubts in anyone's mind that those are largely heritable, and number one, and number two, have large genetic components in their transmission, and for some of them we have very clear-cut evidence of that, because we can see it run in families. Now, with regard to the ocean of mental complaints that people have these days, it feels like an ocean because there's just so much of it, and So part of it is okay. So we're looking at the causes of mental. Well, let's just organize it a little bit. Let's do a tonal lens on it. So we have the heart, the mind, the body, and the soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So with regard to the heart, which is the emotional human being, which refers also to the limbic midbrain, which is where the amygdala and hypothalamus and things like that are. That's the emotional part of the brain, or that's what we call the heart for shorthand. Now, people, like animals, like other animals, for example, dogs, they become attached to others, right? They love, and they can love deeply, and they can become dependent, they can become attached, they can become just reliant on one another, and that's a good thing. But when that doesn't go right, we have what's called an anaclitic depression, which comes from the loss of someone significant in life, a spouse, a parent, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, etc. And so that's both, and that's, I don't know what we call it, if animals share it as well. Would you say it's part of our animal nature to mourn the loss of someone that we've leaned on, hence anaclitic depression? Now, Freud wrote a very, very interesting work, an important one, about 100 years ago, called Mourning and Melancholia, in which he tried to distinguish between the natural features of mourning, which include decreased appetite, some hopelessness, helplessness, the anhedonia, lack of enjoyment, and things like that. But clearly, that's again from the loss, from grief, and so that's different than melancholia. Melancholia would be what we'd call depression, and that's on a spectrum, and it goes from completely debilitating. I mean, someone's basically like a houseplant; they can't move for months. To people, complaining on the internet that they don't like when, I don't know, when the Gilmore Girls is not on that week, or something like trivial like that. So that's a whole spectrum, and that really depends on one's perspective and tolerance for, the vicissitudes of adult life. Anyway, so that's the heart. Now we go to the mind. Now, in the mind, if we look at the mind and we look at it through the nature versus nurture lens, here there's a much greater role for conditioning, a much greater role for bad information, and a much greater role for things like expectations, like, well, I'm in college, so I must be depressed, or all poets get depressed, so if I'm going to be a good poet, I need to be depressed. Everything from that to, the belief that you're worthless, you're useless, you're wasting the earth on this planet, and you don't deserve to be here. So that would be the mental contents. And it's true that some people do have what appears to be a predilection towards paranoid projection or paranoid delusion. Okay, and then we get to the body, which is really straightforward. This refers to the genetic components of mental illness, and here we see robust heritability of things like depression, probably anxiety. Schizophrenia is harder to speak of, but bipolar is definitely heritable, and so on and so forth. And so in the body, we just focus on the nature aspects of it. Although nurture, in the sense that of the environment, the exposure to these endocrine disruptors, exposures to heavy metals like lead or mercury, all of these can also lead to neurological dysfunction, and thus what we'd call psychiatric or emotional dysfunction. And then finally, probably the most important thing is the soul, the spirit, the essence. And man needs meaning. Man needs to have a purpose in life. Without it, we flounder, and then we do all kinds of silly, self-destructive stuff. We get involved in all kinds of trivial, pettiness, and we end up making a big mess of everything. So human beings need to have a direction to point and a goal to point towards. And absent these, it's not at all infrequent for people to develop all kinds of depressions, including existential depressions. So I'm going to stop there and see if there's any more questions. And that was a great question, but that's a huge topic. So let me stop there and see what's up. Did I go too fast?
No, if Wyatt's still on his call or nothing popped up, then I have a follow-up question.
Okay, good. Yeah, so let's keep going.
The last one, essence, you mentioned being the most important. And you also mentioned on the last call that, especially for young people these days, Gen Z, there's this I don't know, listlessness or lack of meaning, or it's just really hard to find something that is worth fighting for or living for. What is something, or what are multiple somethings that a young 20-something-year-old could really work for as meaningful in their lives?
Well, okay, that's good. That's a good question. That hasn't really changed. It's been the same since the beginning of recorded history, and probably longer. The way we're wired, if you just focused on yourself and your own aggrandizement or your own achievement or your own, material reward or whatever, sooner or later that's going to get old. That's going to get boring. That's going to get stale, and that's going to become, what do you call it when something's involuted? Yeah, involuted. And so it's really simple. People need something larger than themselves to believe in and to work towards. And that's not hard to find. It's all over. I mean, it's everywhere. So that's one aspect. The other one is that we're altruistic animals, believe it or not. We have mirror neurons. We have the capacity for empathy, and it's one of our strongest suits. And so there's so much work to be done in the world. I think that, and I hope I didn't sound like I was painting a whole generation, but in a way, I suppose I was. I was just looking at the data, and it seems like it's harder for kids these days, as it is for the adults, to find their way, because the world is changing so rapidly. I mean, very rapidly. And again, who's going to fault them? If you've only grown up since 9/11, and you've grown up with the internet, and then for 2 or 3 years of your childhood, you were taken offline out of the real world altogether and just kind of plugged into the machine. It's no wonder that some of these kids don't want to come out of the house, and they're more comfortable in an environment that's more familiar. So for 20-somethings, it's the same as for 30-somethings and 40-somethings, 50-somethings. The developmental tasks are different, but the strategies for coping with this life, and you need them because this life is not easy, are the same as they've always been. At the top, we have things like altruism, humor, creative sublimation, as in art or science or whatever. At a neurotic level, we have things like, just denial, projection, minimalization, rationalization, da 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 da. And then as people get less well, we get things like paranoid projection and dissociation and delusion, so on and so forth. So Gen Z faces the same challenge that every generation does. For some generations, they're lucky, luckier in a weird way. There was no question during World War II what was up, right? And as horrible as Vietnam War was, and it was horrible, people don't remember, but there was something to be done. I mean, either support the troops or against the war, or it doesn't matter. It does matter, but what does matter is having this sense of purpose and meaning. And without that, you can be sure that there will be psychiatric syndromes following thereafter. I mean, look at Hollywood, for example, which is basically the culture of narcissism. Of course, right? Most people don't do well there. So something along those lines. These are huge topics, but I'm happy to talk about them. If you can be more specific, I'll be more specific. Thanks for that question, Lex. I hope I did it justice. Is that what you were thinking? Can you give me a little bit more orientation?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something more specific. But I guess I haven't lived in other generations, so it's hard to say that this one's any different with feelings of meaninglessness. But it definitely felt like a shift, because I remember when I went to college when I was 18, before I had gone to college,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if this is just meme culture or whatnot, there weren't as many jokes. It felt like, this could be a generalization that's totally incorrect. My own personal experience, I think. Online, just of people either being depressed, hating their lives, joking about it, like college kids joking about, I want to walk in front of a bus or whatever.
Yeah.
And about the time of 17 or 18, I went to college. And then online with memes, and this is a funny barometer, I guess, but it just seems like the culture of humor been very, very, what's the word? Self-deprecating.
Yeah, no, I noticed that too. Yeah, yeah.
I hope I die. If I died, it wouldn't be so bad.
I know there is that. I think that there's much more tolerance, and people find morbid humor much funnier. And there's this kind of like, well, it's the whole doomer stereotype, right?
What's doomer stereotype?
Oh, doomer? Doomers, zoomers, and boomers?
No.
All right, well, you know what boomers are, right?
Right.
That's the Vietnam War generation. Then comes, let's see, and then doomers are, I think, millennials or Gen Z. I think they're more millennials, but they could be Gen Z. That just see that there's no purpose to the world. We're all doomed, right? If the AI doesn't get us, climate change will get us. If climate change doesn't get us, the biological weapons will get us. If the biological weapons don't get us, the nuclear weapons will get us. If the nuclear weapons don't get us, so on and so forth. The doomers, right?
Yeah.
And they've got some pretty hilarious humor, I gotta say. And then there's and then there's Gen Z, and and then there's Zoomers, right? Zoomers are I believe the millennials that haven't bought into the doomer mentality. They're the minority, and they just want to advance their careers, and they're just zooming right. You know who strikes me as Zoomer, and it's a compliment, would be Palmer Luckey, right? These can-do kids. And we have them in every generation, thank God, right? We don't have as many as we need, but Zoomers, people that just like say, hey, well, this has to be done. I don't see anybody else doing it, so well, I guess I'll have to do it since no one else is doing it, and it needs to happen. We need more Zoomers, I think, and Doomer is more of a kind of a fashion. Remember, goth was pretty dark too, or styled itself that way.
Goth, I always understood goth as being fringe.
Yes and no. I think I don't know my pop culture that well, but I think there was a time when it was pretty mainstream. I mean, like what's his name? White wedding guy.
Oh.
Nice day for a white wedding. Billy Idol, right?
Yeah, Billy Idol.
I don't know what he is, but he was pretty popular, and that seemed pretty. And then but this is this part is. I mean, every generation must develop its own protest, right? What's worrisome is there's no protest. If the generation just rolls over and says, "Well, we're the victim, and you guys screwed up, and now we're all screwed." And the reason that's not good is not because people don't have a right to do whatever they want, but because you end up with a crappy world because nobody's built the world, right? Nobody's invested into it. It's like if we go, for example, if you go to a public library in I don't know, Middle America somewhere, at some point somebody had to take the initiative saying, hey, we need a library. And somebody else had to build it, and somebody else had to fund it, and somebody else had to stock it with books. These things take human labor. And so if an entire generation just flakes out on that, which I don't think is entirely happening, then it's going to be not good going forward. It's just common sense, right? If you don't train a generation of surgeons, when you need surgery 40 years later, it may be more difficult for you. So let's see, did I go off topic?
No, that was on topic.
Okay. So I mean, how you slice it up for discussion or for demographic purposes or whatever. These are perennial human problems. Every generation, every culture has these same issues, right? Because of the nature of our experience here on this planet, right? It's just the way it is. So I'm surprised no one's asked me to say, well, wait a minute, you say that the suffering is unnecessary. How, in what way is the suffering unnecessary? And what I mean by that is that the suffering is self-inflicted, right? That if you look at your suffering as a human being, most of it is mental. Most of it is just talk in your head, and it's conflict between thoughts in your head. And so thinking we have this unitary self, this kind of like little homunculus living in our skull, which is totally false, we imagine that we can resolve the problems that our minds comes up with by using more thought. Well, that's like washing blood with blood. It's not going to work. And so people suffer. The vast majority, unless I hope I'll be more than happy to be corrected if somebody wants to correct me. But I'm maintaining that the vast bulk of suffering for humans is because of their minds, and the aspect of their minds that causes the suffering is thought. And the reason the thought causes suffering is because people have conflicting thoughts, or they have negative thoughts, or they have thoughts they don't want to have. At any rate, there's a big battle going on inside their minds. Because somehow or another they've fallen for the delusion that that's what they are, is their minds, and that judgment in their minds is the same thing as judgment, right? But that's not the case. It turns out that our mind is really more like something we observe than something we mix up. And then the open question then becomes, well, wait a minute. What do you mean we observe? One observes? Yeah, okay, it's something that one observes. And then the question becomes, well, what is this one that you're referring to? And this one that I'm referring to would be also correspond to that soul, spirit, essence, observing essence, or something like that, creative essence, as the and we point to that as the soul, and using the tonal as the model. So every human must strive all their life actually to align their heart, their mind, their body, and their soul. And these four dimensions, and this is just a shorthand way of remembering it, they have to be pointed in the same direction. What's the case for most humans is their hearts pointed one, at least some of the time, their hearts pointed one way, their minds pointed another way. God knows what they're doing with their body, and they don't even acknowledge the existence of a soul or spirit or essence or anything like that. So obviously that's going to lead to trouble, and we could see it all around because we have, 120,000 ODs last year? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Can I?
Please, it really helps. It really helps. Go ahead.
So, I didn't ask initially because I'm of the same opinion about the suffering being unnecessary and mind created or self created.
Mm-hmm.
But my caveat to that is that when I try to bring up over like multiple years now this type of conversation with somebody where I can see these patterns, or in myself as I've seen them more and more, for somebody to acknowledge a lot of what you just said takes an extreme, and I mean extreme, curiosity, because it seems to be very, very little present, like very little present, an extreme curiosity of what's actually going on in somebody's head, a belief that they can change, and then what seems to be like how do I say this word? Accumulation of factors appropriate in their life to actually make them get to the point of realization of this homunculus self or whatnot. And it just seems like such a rarity that I almost question whether or not it is necessary, all this suffering of self. Like, it almost does seem necessary by virtue of the fact that it is a rarity that somebody has that level of curiosity and can get to the realization of the fact that, okay, I'm creating all these problems myself, and that can go away.
Well, I think that's a very good point. It does seem rare, but it's let's see. What I'm reminded of is people that even though we may not agree with them in terms of the metaphors they've chosen to use to understand the world. I'm thinking right now of the religiously devout and people who haven't had the advantage of a philosophical education and haven't studied metamodernism in France in the 20th century or whatever. So they're just dealing with life, and they have a simple spirituality and a simple humility, and I've seen folks like this who are able to transcend their own egos because they're sincerely religious. I mean, sincerely, they sincerely ask for guidance. They sincerely, seek to do the right thing. And these folks do as well. And I don't find those people as rare. I guess is what I'm saying. I'm saying you could find old people, old black people, brown people, white people, any color people, buried away in these small towns and churches, and some of these people are highly advanced, but they don't feel any need to advertise it. They don't see anything remarkable about it. They have attuned themselves with what they would call the will of God, right? Or what Taoists would call the way, or what Muslims would call, I guess, submission. But they've done it so thoroughly and so genuinely and so authentically that they don't need any of this this intellectual stuff to live that life, I guess is how I'm saying it. So I'm saying it's not as rare as you think it is. It just comes in such a form that's esoteric to the modern world, or hidden from the modern world. But it's a simple, humble acceptance and acknowledgement, and it's characterized by gratitude and love and just more and more of those. And so I'm going to have to disagree. I'm going to say, yeah, enlightenment in the sense of Vajrayana Buddhist or Sufi or Hindu, and if you look at it that way, yes. But there's another way to look at this. All roads lead to the sea. There are other roads that are not popular now, that lead to a quiet, deep, profound understanding. And maybe all the technical words aren't there, but they're not needed. So that's what I would say to that. Does that help?
Yeah, fortunately, I guess I'm isolated from a lot of that.
Well, many of us are, right? It's very, very, very out of fashion. It'll probably be coming back as people get more distressed and to realize that, wait a minute, there's no way to think our way out of this. But I think that's yeah, exactly. And how popular is religion in the media these days? I mean, if it's anything, it's barely disguised ridicule of the Pope, or the of religion in general. It's not okay to be religious among large swaths of the population in the U.S. at the moment. And we're seeing how that goes, right? These things evolve, and they stick around for a reason, because they have a function socially, if nothing else. And so, living without it, let's see how it goes.
I think Wyatt might have come on for a second, but we were in the middle of something.
No, I can hear you fine. I can't hear Dr. A very well.
You can't? Really? That's not good news. Is it a sound problem?
I can't hear him at all now.
Lex, can you hear me?
Drop and come back.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have to head out anyway. Wyatt, I've got a 10 o'clock. Well, Well, hey, listen, thanks for the questions, Lex. Those are good questions. Those are big, hard questions. I think if we can get more concrete, and say, hey, there's a 27-year-old kid from San Diego who da-da-da-da-da. And let me say this very loud and clear, and I got to figure out how to do this. I don't want to get myself sued here, Lex. And so I got to figure out a way to put the caveats up there. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not a, da-da-da-da-da. Because I'm worried that someone might misinterpret this. Well, I'm less worried about that than worried about somebody seizing the opportunity to make some, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So
Then I'm curious, because you just brought this 27-year-old San Diego, whatnot. I enjoy Reddit. It's like a nice cross section of like people
Sure.
in the world.
Yeah.
I find, and there's a lot of profiles of people on there who are very interesting, or maybe representative of a lot of the problems people face these days. If I bring one of those to you, is that stimulating or interesting?
Sure, that'd be great.
Or,
Yeah,
they may
no
be
identifying.
real or not, but-
Yeah, no identifying information though. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
And we could talk about, so there's the two dimensions that we need to look at. One is the heart, mind, body, and soul kind of going vertically. And then as we move out from the individual, we have the interpersonal, the familial, the social, then the religious and cultural and national contexts. And there's ways of looking at ourselves, I think, that could be more useful and will be more useful going forward because of the AIs, etc. So, good.
One more thing, just about the mic quality. When I was watching back the video yesterday, when you lean over more into the mic, like if you hunch your head over onto it, and I think you put pressure on it, the quality gets distorted, as opposed to when you're sitting more upright, is what I noticed.
Oh, that's interesting to know. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah, if you look back at the video, probably 2/3 of the way in, I think your audio got a little distorted because of bending over, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm thinking that the wired is probably, and that's probably the way we're going to end up, is wired lavalier.
Okay.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's good to know. All right, gentlemen. We'll see you around. Hope everyone's doing well. Thanks a lot for dropping in. Thanks for the questions, Lex. That really helps a lot. I mean, I completely flounder just speaking into cold air. You see what I'm saying? And so a question really helps. Okay, Wyatt, nice to see. Okay, Wyatt looks like he's headed out too, or he's waving. Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to have to sign off now.
Bye-bye.
All right, see you around. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. See you, Wyatt.